What's going on, everybody? I apologize for the virtual background, but my room is a mess and there's boxes everywhere trying to get moved out and graduated. But, anyways, my name's Ian Zimmerman. This is my final project for music, media, and culture, and it's going to be an intro to a scene. So let's talk about this before I tell you what I'm doing. This scene has been a huge part of my life. It's something that I yell. It's not a phase, mom. It's just who I am sometimes. Uh, it has introduced me to a ton of new artists and new styles of music that I didn't think I really knew. And it's really just a great genre overall to listen to. So that scene is emo. Let's get into it. All right. So whenever you think of emo, you often think about pop punk and Paramore and the misunderstood kids standing outside of the Hot Topic at your local mall. I'm here to tell you that's not at all the start of emo. That's a whole different phase of the emo scene, and I will tell you guys about that later on. Emo actually got started way earlier than you might think in the 80s in Washington, D.C. So this really happened as a response to the punk and post-hardcore movements that were very prevalent on the East Coast in cities like Philadelphia and D.C. at the time. And this was really when artists started to move away from thrashy guitar and like driving rhythms that were so prevalent during that period. And vocalists focused on very hard hitting, relatable, and emotional lyrics. Bands that really formed out of this movement that are very notable were Rites of Spring, Wasted Youth, and Ian MacKaye's band Embrace. Let's talk about the effects of the emo movement. So, like I said about Ian MacKaye from the band Embrace, he actually was one of the main people who was talking out and speaking out against the coining of the term emo. Thrasher magazine at the time was the main contributor to this, coining the term emo core in the mid 80s to define bands like Rites of Spring and Embrace. So, obviously, there was a lot of pushback from the scene. Nobody in the scene likes being called emo. Just a little heads up. So definitely something to be wary about. But a lot of singers and a lot of bands spoke out against this. One example was Ian MacKaye at a live show in Los Angeles. And I'll play a little snippet right here.
Okay. I must say one thing. I must say, emo core must be the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Oh, come on, man!
But, just in case you're wondering, I read in my Thrasher the other day that in fact, what my band, along with other bands in the city, was playing was emo core. I'm thinking emo Phillips, comedian Ian core? Why no, emotional hardcore. As if hardcore wasn't emotional to begin with. Anyway, it's caca. I hate to say it, but you can only hold your silence so long with something as stupid as shit. Fuck, man, I was bleeding. Well, emo.
It seems brutally honest, but I honestly agree with him. I think that hardcore was pretty emotional already. The subject matter was emotional. And to say that emo core is emotional hardcore, it was kind of its own movement altogether. So a lot of people, caused pushback against that. And eventually people dropped the emo core and just started calling it emo. So obviously with this new movement and this new scene, as it moves out of its birthplace in Washington, D.C., by the early 90s, people have already started to put their own spin on it. A big thing that happened was out of Chicago and other Midwest cities and states, creating what they called Heartland emo, or now to be known as Midwest emo. It was a response to the emo core, might I say, the emo core definition out of DC, and they completely moved away from the thrashiness of the genre and really focused on acoustic centric sound, a lack of really anything that was too harsh on the ears. And the singers genuinely sang about heavy emotional responses, usually depression, anger, sadness. Often the lyrics were very heartfelt. one major key player in this movement for Midwest emo for me would be the Get Up Kids and their album Something to Write Home About. I'm going to include a little sample here.
You forget two anniversary songs. Bottles bite back. Your tolerance wrong. Your good intention.
So one thing that I think is really cool about this is vocal talent is pretty much not important. A lot of these singers are not classically trained. They often sing to the point of exhaustion, and their lyrics are raw and, often written very close to the time of recording. So it sounds very human and very authentic. And I think that that's what draws me to Midwest emo. And it's one of my favorite genres to this day. So yeah, since then, emo has kind of, became Midwest emo, and then it shaped other subgenres like math rock with bands like Dance Gavin Dance. A modern example I could give to that is the band Tiny Moving Parts, often defined as one of the key players in Midwest emo, at least of the recent 5 years. So I'll put a little sample in of them.
There's a yellow pill in my pocket in case I need to calm down. Hands are feeling frostbit as I'm frozen to the ground. Why can't life just work out the way I want it to? All these questions I keep asking leave me constantly confused.
Now, this next part, guys, I need to tread pretty lightly on. I'm an avid listener to the genre, so I need to be careful because there's a lot of sour there's a lot of sour taste left in people's mouths about the emo revival. So the emo revival was an early and mid 2000s resurgence of emo music on social media like MySpace, Tumblr, and then moving into stuff like Twitter and other forms of social media with bands like McCafferty, The Front Bottoms, Pine Grove. Honestly, too many to count. I listen to too many of these bands. Miniature Tigers is another huge one. And so these bands were often more indie centric, acoustic, just like everything else, but they were, the raw vocals that kind of came out of Midwest emo because it wasn't as pleasing to the ears. And I think that that's what drew in some of the crowd. Was like, wow, this is kind of forcing its way back into the hardcore movement. So obviously there is still a hardcore side to this. Bands like Modern Baseball, Joyce Manor, brand new, but that's kind of walking the line towards screamo with bands like Hawthorne Heights. These bands really dominated, but some purists will always say that the emo revival was never a revival because emo never died. Now I agree with that, but I call it the emo facelift. It gave a more personal touch, more palatable music, and had people who would have never associated with emo in general listening to this music because it's what was hot on social media. So definitely brought a lot more fans into the scene, and allowed people to experiment more and create more, new and unusual sounds. So definitely, as far as I'm concerned, the emo revival was very necessary. I think the overall coolest thing about the movement was that it required a lot of experimenting by individuals that really wanted to define their own sound. They didn't want to fit in with the scene, and I think that that's the beauty of it. Unlike the bands before them, they were riddled with imperfections. The vocals were intense, full of metaphors, and a lot of them actually appear as like literary art, not just songs. There's a lot of spoken word parts, a lot of introduction of the use of sampling voicemails, which was kind of cool. It was like the original like diss track part of the scene. So, but it was more not against somebody that you had beef with, but more like your ex who broke your heart. Definitely an interesting phase, and some of my favorite bands still came out of this emo revival. Often you're going to hear emo referred to as, oh, it's not a phase, mom, it's a lifestyle, it's who I am. I kind of agree there. Emo's had a huge impact on both the music and the culture, with fans. So fans of emo usually all dressed in darker colors. They had fascination with body modifications, whether that be, tattoos, piercings, whatever. Definitely interesting. So with the maturing of emo into this Midwest emo, this more, softcore aesthetic, you had to get the fashion to match. So a lot of people traded in their darker colored clothing for mute colors and flannels and distressed jeans and skate shoes. It was more like a dad look, more of a softcore coffee shop kind of aesthetic. A lot of hand-drawn band tees came out of this era. And I really think that the cool thing about the whole scene is that the fans' dress started to reflect the change in sound that was evident in the emo scene. Now, so I might get a lot of hate for this next part, but honestly, bear with me. Hold your booze till the end. We're going to talk a lot about what isn't emo. We talked about what is, the sounds associated, the impact on culture, but I really want to talk about what isn't emo. As many emo artists decided to hit the mainstream, they had an impact on people in other genres. Many artists began making emotional music that broke down barriers in their own genres. Big examples are Juice WRLD, Machine Gun Kelly. They created emo inspired work that fits their respective genre with, rap, or, Machine Gun Kelly kind of towing line between rap and kind of some indie at some points. But I am here to tell you that this is not the emo scene. They kind of it became less of a separated subgenre of rock and instead became kind of an umbrella term to define an emotional nature of musical work. But I don't agree with referring to any of these artists as emo, because they aren't. They are emo contributors. They instead kind of trailblaze their own subgenres, which is kind of cool. And the other big thing is seeing what these artists bring to the table. It's very impressive. It's genre bending. I'm very impressed with, Tickets to My Downfall, and Sampling is very cool as well. But the one thing that really sticks out to me is the influence of emo and rock bands on these artists, with, Paramore, Fall Out Boy being influences to MGK, influence of metal bands like Black Sabbath and Metallica for Lil Uzi Vert and Juice WRLD. It's just a testament to the incredible reach of rock and the subgenres that came out of it. So definitely something to think about, what isn't emo. And, I might catch a little bit of flack for it, but hey, it's my opinion. If you don't, all right, guys. Well, that's all I have for my final project. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you were exposed to some new music, some new artists that you can go check out. Everybody have a great summer. If you're graduating, congratulations. I'll see you guys around.